start with a quote that Mr. Walker just gave me from Nikki Giovanni that says, it's not who you attend school with, but who controls the school.
That's
And that
powerful.
is so profound. Don't you think, Miss Taylor?
Absolutely. Yes. I love Nikki Giovanni, and she is always giving us gems. And that one is just like anything else I've heard her say. It's powerful and it is true.
Right. So, and it's a good segue to kind of the topic of the show today. And as I actually had the thought, what I was doing, Miss Taylor, just to give you some background, I've been doing a series of um Black parents homeschooling.
Yes.
So I know, our voice is never told whenever, anything happens, nobody comes to Black America. And so I started off actually with my mentee, Felania, who attends Paseo. She is responsible for her siblings because her mother and father has to work. So she
Mm-hmm.
talked about the routine. She talked about, what she's been doing. Then I had on one of the vice principals from Central, Gwen Litzy, who's got 3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Another friend of mine who's got 3 kids. And so they talked about having more than one child, K through 12, how to get those schedules, how to do the work, the homework. So I'm just kind of doing that series. Then I'm going to do single children. I still have that to do. I still have
Mm-hmm.
teachers to talk to. I still have school administrators to talk to. But today, it looks like I couldn't find the show because I guess it was yesterday. I was in
Yeah.
the car, as I always am, listening to NPR, and this show came on, and I see the information, but the statistics, this link that you sent me, but I actually listened to a whole show of
Mm-hmm.
people being interviewed. Did you hear that in the interview?
I did not see the interview, but I did read the stats and the data that was included in that particular story, and it was remarkable. I always take data also, though, with a grain of salt. I look
Okay.
at their sample size, who they talk to. So it said, now who's to say, but it said that it was a racially diverse, socioeconomically diverse sample of about, I believe, 1,500
It,
families or
yeah.
households.
Mhm.
That's a small number in the grand scheme of things. But it's data nonetheless. And I think they compared the data that they presented with data from another study that had similar results.
Okay, so
So,
before we go too far,
yeah.
we are referring to on NPR yesterday. The topic was survey shows big remote learning gaps for low income and special needs children. And so it goes on to talk about, as Ms. Taylor was just saying, the sampling of about 1,500 parents in different social classes. And so they broke it out between making less than 25,000, between 25 and I think and 50,000, between 50 and 100, and then over $100,000 dollars annual income in that household. And just ask them a series of different questions. Let me see, was that first one? Does your child have access to computer or tablet for school or work? Another question, if your school is offering distance learning activities, how much has your child been able to use these resources? So if you go to this website, and I apologize for not having the exact website for you to go to, but you can query NPR and Coronas and survey remote learning, and you'll come up with, you can see these same statistics. But the conversation I thought on NPR, which was interesting for me, and they were just kind of vetting this whole thing with the coronavirus and the achievement gap. We already knew there was already a gap. So now with COVID, you've got kids at home who may or may not have technology, who may or may not have access to the internet. So they've just probably have totally been unplugged since school let out. So
Yeah. I mean, you have to think about it in terms. So first of all, I always like common language, and I know that people use the achievement gap, and people have a clear understanding of what that means. For
mhm,
me, however, when I say these are under-resourced children from
mhm,
under-resourced districts, so there really is not an achievement gap, because achievement gap denotes to me that these children are not capable, but they are absolutely capable. What I
mhm,
will say is that there's an opportunity gap that
okay.
exists. And
Mhm,
so when it comes to funding, when it comes to policies, when it comes to high quality, efficient educators, when it comes to materials and curriculum and things like that, that the opportunity has been there, but we have failed, and you hear me say we have failed, to give the students and the families what they need to be successful. So,
Okay.
start right there. And so, but now here we are, COVID-19. So you had
Mhm.
children that already were under-resourced and struggling for a
Mhm.
number of reasons. And then we closed schools. And we, in a rush, the first thing we said is, oh, these families need food, which for some they did.
Right.
And then we need to get hardware out, meaning tablets or laptops or whatever. And then we need to get hotspots. So we need to get them connected, as if that was going to solve a problem that has existed way before we got to COVID-19. There
Mhm.
was already a digital divide.
Mhm.
Even some districts that quote unquote were 1-to-1 were still having to give out devices. How
Right.
is it possible that you're a district that has a 1-to-1 initiative, yet the students don't have devices or don't have hotspots to be able to tap into the internet? So that's
Right.
a failure on our part. Um, and so many of them may have tapped out since spring break.
Right. And
Go
just
ahead.
if I could just, yeah, if I could just insert, when you look at and I'm not looking at any one school district because this
Mm-hmm.
is across the United States. When you start talking about free and reduced lunch, uh,
Mm-hmm.
those percentages in most urban school districts are probably what, 95% or higher.
Yes.
So the issue when you start talking about, Bloom's taxonomy, the issue of for food was real. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was good to see that the schools were addressing that initially, like we got to get these babies food. We know we're not open, but some of the kids do rely on those two square, whatever meals that they get from the school
Yeah.
bill.
I
So
would agree with that.
that was
I
definitely
also,
real. And then just
yeah.
go back to your definition on achievement. I get it,
Mm-hmm.
but I still, I'm sorry, just briefly say that again, your definition of the achievement.
I think of it as an opportunity gap, not an achievement gap, because I think when we say achievement gap, there's a notion that these students can't achieve. And that's not it. And then we're comparing them to white middle class families. Like, if we want to be really clear about that, when
Mhm.
white middle class students and families are not performing at the highest levels. So if you want to compare black and brown kids to another subgroup of students, let's look at our Asian children, or those that are outperforming even the middle class white children, which Asian children generally do across the United States and across the country, the globe.
Mhm.
So, because if I'm doing toward the middle, then what I'm saying is, oh, we only want you to get up to here and
Right.
not surpass that. So we
Right.
have to really, like, I'm like, come on, this is a complex issue. We have to make sure we have some common language and some real understanding about what is the goal, where we're trying to take children,
Right.
and what standard are we looking at before we even start having these conversations.
Okay.
You know? So yeah.
So I get that. Okay. So looking at where we're at with COVID, and that, and I'm going to go question by question because if you can have a time, if I can find the link for the conversation, the
Yeah.
issue that they discussed was the reality of these learning gaps that are very real right now.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you said some of the students, I think it's more than some who were just not logging in. I was on a show, I'm sorry, Zoom call a couple of weeks ago, and the issue with ADA, average daily attendance.
Yeah.
The state of Missouri can't say who's logging on, who's not. I mean, this is something new for them, and
Yeah.
we know that school districts get paid per student.
Yeah.
But
Per many hours that students are engaged in learning.
right,
And so it used to be per day, but now they broke it down even by hour. But we have to be really clear. Like, digital learning is not for all children, just like it's not for all adults.
mm-hmm,
So the fact that everyone decided to make a shift and do digital learning, I think that was low hanging fruit, and I think that we did not think through the issue well. And so when you take, say, pre-K to third graders who are still very concrete learners,
mm-hmm,
hands-on, body kinesthetic, visual learners, was it in fact the best decision to then have children on devices to do
So
their
with that
learning.
said, before you get too far, what
Mm-hmm.
then could have been an option?
So an option could have been a group of educators that were creative and innovative enough to actually put together some material boxes. I did this for my own grandchildren who are 4 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did is I went through, markers, colored pencils, crayons, glue sticks, rulers, and I made a list. And actually on the Dreams KC, I did a video. How do you inventory your house to see
Mm-hmm.
what materials you have? And then let's start putting some lessons around or together around the skills that we want them to master.
Okay.
So if I want a kid to in kindergarten count from 1 to 100, how do I do one-to-one correspondence in my home with pennies or with marbles or with Legos?
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't need to happen on a tablet. That was easy, but was that the right thing to do? So
Right.
as you shift into middle school, yes, I can see having some technology in there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that needs to be the only way in which to expose children to learning. Again, I think it was low hanging fruit. I think it was easy. And we did not take into account that many of our families that, like you said, you had people that had to take care of their siblings because mom and dad both work. They didn't take into account those type of families. They didn't take into account the single parent that had multiple children in the home that all of a sudden became an essential worker when just a month before they would have fired them, stepped over them, and kept moving.
Right.
That didn't have the time to devote and sit. No one, I'm not going to say no one, many educators, many administrators, district level folks didn't think about what is a high quality digital platform that I can recommend to the families. It
Right.
was like, let's get this is available, let's do it. And
Well,
I'm not saying everyone failed, but I
right.
am saying there apparently has been a big failure. When you look at this data that was presented in this study, parents are saying it was low quality. The sites that they were going to were low quality, that they weren't challenging. If kids were already struggling with reading, how do you expect them to get online and actually read the instructions to do an online task?
Right.
Like, you got to think about those things.
Right. So, because you always say a lot.
I'm sorry. Stop me when you need to.
And that's what I'm saying. So before you go too far, so looking right now, they're guesstimating schools are definitely going to be different come the fall.
We hope.
We hope. So what kind of recommendations, just based on, like you said, you came up with ideas for your grandkids, activities for them to do to work towards mastery. Are you tracking that?
We are, yeah. We randomly practice all the time. We are an interesting family, to say the least. People probably would think that I would have them and be schooling them. One, that's their parents' responsibility, not mine. My job is to support them in doing that. But they also have a very engaged and active other grandmother. And so it was really interesting. We just kind of played off of each other. So they had school in the afternoons from 2 to 5 every day. Not early mornings. They actually did a lot of things with gardening, with coloring, with writing. They have handwriting books, things like that. All kinds of toys and activities. They do have some digital games and devices. And we just kind of worked around all of that. And then how do we determine whether or not they mastered a skill? Well, if I want them to count, guess what? I ask them to count. Or we're in the house and it's like, oh my God, I got this many coins. How much is that? And so just in a regular routine of living day to day, I can have a list of skills that I need them to achieve and infuse that just throughout our daily life. Right. So one, they're seeing the practical application of what they're learning, and they don't see it as I have to sit down and be here and be engaged for hours. We can't sit, beyond an hour on a Zoom call.
Right.
But we want, and I said this before COVID, I'll say it during COVID, I'll say it after COVID. We have to reimagine education, and we have failed to do so in 100+ years. And it's a complex issue, but we try to simplify answers. We're looking for a silver bullet to solve these problems that have been pre-existing, continue to exist, and will continue to persist if we are not innovative in our thinking. Right. I listened to a school official and a philanthropic leader have a conversation. It was a recorded interview, it was up on the Kaufman website. And I was mortified to hear this district level official talk about what she had learned since COVID. She's been in the educational field for 20 plus years. She started out as a teacher. And the things that she was talking about, I'm like, I knew that year one or two of my teaching profession. Like, what, how can you lead a district and you're saying you're just now learning this information and these data points, and you serve some of the most marginalized students in our city? That's a problem.
Well, and I think that is an example of the quote that I started the show off with, that Mr. Parker just introduced me to today, that it's not who you sit next to, but it's who controls the system.
That's
and
it.
So we know that our community was successful when we controlled our educational system, when we had Black school administrators, when we had Black teachers. Even now, I'm glad, as I'm sure you are, when I go to the store and a kid from one of my classes or one of my programs sees me, hey, Miss Montgomery, you shop here? And I'm like, yeah. And so, just happy to see me. And, they just, it's almost like they're looking in awe, like, I can't believe she's a real person.
Right.
And so it just cracks me up.
They forget that we're people too. But it's important for them. And I think the biggest thing, they're in shock because you live in their community. You live amongst them. So you may know their mother, their grandmother, their aunt, their cousin. It's been plenty of times where I said, I went to school with your mother, or I went to school with your aunt. Now let me have to pick up the phone and call your grandparents. Because we live in the community. That means we have a vested interest in the success of the students that we teach.
Right. And not only that, for the student, just that connection, just seeing Miss Taylor, just seeing Miss Montgomery, oh wow, like I said, she's a real person.
Yeah.
But just that community village feeling, I think that the kids get that.
Yeah.
And then I think they know, oh, I better act right in class because, I might see her, or, I'm saying, you just never know. So I hope that, I don't know. So anyway, so back to the topic and remote learning. So we know some of the kids who are already being left behind are being left behind. And then the issues, let's talk about special needs for a minute. So kids who are on IEPs.
Yes.
How do you, because we don't have any real data. You and I are just talking, we're just having a conversation. What would be your guesstimate, or what would be your thinking on how those students are going through COVID right now?
I think that depending on what their diagnosis is, so some may be autistic, we may have some that have physical ailments, they may be blind, they may be hard of hearing, they may have processing issues. So it really depends. I hate that we couch them all under one umbrella.
Right.
So I think that some students will have some mental health challenges, because if you take an autistic children that may be severely impaired, they need consistency. They need to know what's coming. And so to have an abrupt shift or change in their schedule and their daily life, being away from their friends, I'm sure that had a mental health impact on those students. So you can't even get to any type of learning or support for those type of students because they're dealing with all of that.
Right.
So but I was reading some of that data also, and it's talked about special needs children. I think the data point said 1 in 5 or something like that really was even focused on any type of learning at all in the home. And they were what it was, 1 in 5 are only getting the services that they are allowed to get or was receiving prior to the closing of schools.
Right.
So they may have been getting physical therapy. They may have been getting occupational therapy, speech therapy. They may have been getting one-on-one tutoring and support in reading or math or whatever it may have been. And we already know that schools were understaffed. And so if you take one special ed teacher and then are they getting online to do this? How do you do that online? Were they fearful to go into someone's home Was it safe? Was someone sick in their home? So I don't necessarily fault an educator for not wanting to go, but at the same time, I'm just like, man, that's one, they had a very heavy caseload, I'm sure. But
Right.
then two, without being with that family and being with that kid, how could they possibly deliver effective, efficient services to that family? So what should have happened is that mental health professionals or people that have that area of expertise should have been working with districts to actually figure out and formulate a plan to serve those students. But I think we reacted so quickly,
Right.
without thinking through what was best, that I don't think our special needs communities have been served well during this time. Just like our general ed students haven't, all of them have not been served well during this time.
And the concern is, if one of the new solutions in going back to opening schools this fall is to have smaller class sizes, just like you said, we already have a shortage of teachers. So how would that look if a teacher currently has 30 kids in their class, and because of social distancing, I can only get 15 in that same space, to allow for the 6 feet? Where are the other 15 kids going to go? Are we going to have school in the morning, let those kids go? And I've heard that model too. School in the morning, take a break, then have schools in the afternoon. So there's a teacher now working an 8-hour day. Now you've got double the bus expense. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of solutions they come up with. But I definitely agree with you that they're going to have to be creative. They're going to have to figure something out that's going to work for the education of the students. Now I know on the other end, because I know I just happen to see a couple of parents out and about, and like, how's the homeschooling going, this, that, and the other. And on the other end, a lot of the parents feel their child is getting further along. And they're concerned, like, when school comes back up, they've gone so far. Well, two of the parents are educators. They've already gone online to look at DESE grade level expectations. They're like, my child's already in the next grade. So
Absolutely.
when school comes back up, are they going to have to go to the 7th grade as opposed to, going from 6th to 7th when they're already mastering 7th grade stuff? Am I getting that right? You see, they're in 6 now doing 7th grade work. So when they get back, you see what I'm saying?
I think that is a lot that we have to deal with. A lot of parents got their students home and really realized what they could do and what they could achieve outside the 4 walls of that building when pushed, when the expectations were set high. We have to acknowledge the fact that many of our students have fallen by the wayside. They tapped out of the educational process because we were setting very low expectations within the 4 walls of the classroom, thinking that our kids couldn't. The teachers and administrators that were leading those schools, going back to that quote, didn't think that our children were capable of learning.
Right.
But some of them needed one-on-one, which is what they've been getting at home, that they weren't getting in, and that's been able to push them. Parents have recognized some gaps, been able to go close up those gaps, say, oh, you got that now? Okay, let's jump back over here and we can go ahead and move you forward.
Not to mention the lack of classroom distractions. Now the students who were behind, or the students who wanted to ask questions or do whatever, if they have the right setting at home, they can now just focus on their schoolwork, which is what they've been trying to do anyway, instead of watching the teacher deal with those 1 or 2 difficult students who have stopped that whole classroom from learning.
So because of their poor classroom management or their unwillingness to utilize restorative justice practices or whatever it may be. But you're absolutely right. You talk about the social pressures, you talk about bullying, you talk about going to smaller class sizes wouldn't be bad when you've been in some buildings and you've seen there's been 20 or 30 kids in a class, whereas we know that is not manageable and the kids are not going to get what they need. And so, teachers often tend to teach to the middle. They lack the skills to differentiate instruction for those that excel, those that are far below, and those that are on course to do what they do. Some of them, they don't lack the skill. They choose not to do it.
Right.
No one's checking. Who's going to tell? The kids don't know. So it's a lot. Again, it's a very complex issue we got to talk about. You talked about establishing relationships. One of the things that I know is the students will perform for you when you have a relationship with them. When you get to know them, their likes, their dislikes, who they are, how they learn best, all of those things. And kids know the difference between somebody that's faking it and somebody that's real. And they show up and they will do their best when you've established a relationship. But if I'm just coming in every day to deliver instructions, to dump information, and then I go back somewhere else and I have no vested interest in these students, in this community, in their families, then that oftentimes the way in which that shows up is that we say students are performing. Students are very well capable of performing. They choose not to perform for people that don't care for them.
And I think it does come up because I know a couple of years ago, and I found out, and I think they still can, they can go to the MAP score to that student and go to the teacher. That they can take a look at what teachers that student had for like the past whatever many years, and they can say, oh, it's these three people.
Yeah.
This student was under these three people. Oh, this student was under, you know, this student did better. Oh, look, they were under a different teacher. Same building, same school. So there is a way to track ineffective teachers. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. You've already touched on it, how, you know, we got drive-by teachers, you know, they just there for a paycheck. They don't care if the students, you know, learn or not. And so I'm even curious, well, part of that report that the audio, if you get a chance to hear it, they were saying they feel schools should be spending this summer on teacher PD.
I agree.
Because they don't know how to deliver remote learning. Some of them were caught off guard. Joe Phillips of the KCPS school district was on a Zoom call a couple of weeks ago and said, I appreciated his comments because he was so honest. He said when he first got hired by Dr. Bedell, he said, your district, this technology infrastructure is behind. And so now they're trying to push this remote learning on an infrastructure that was not ready for it.
Right. And when you talk about infrastructure, you're not just talking about the physical infrastructure, you're talking about the people, the human capital. Yeah. And we have, you know, I think it is really good for young people to have cross-generational or intergenerational educators in their spaces. I think it's great to have diversity of gender, age, all of those things are important. But what you have to do, and I'm sorry, I think good leaders create a culture. A particular culture, and no matter where you find them, be it in a school, be it in a corporate setting, be it in the nonprofit sector, whatever it may be, the leader establishes a culture and an environment, and they message that in all that they do, all the time. And people, they hire people that buy into that why, and there will be a good fit for that culture. And I think what has happened, for example, you're talking about KCPS, in that particular interest is teachers were able to say, I ain't doing it. I ain't learning that. And that was okay for some administrators. And that was okay for some district level leaders. And I'm not saying Dr. Bedell and his team, he's been here a fairly short time. But what I'm saying is when you buy into the why, and as a leader, you've created a particular culture of excellence, that every single thing that we do is going to be for the best interest of children. There's no educator, no paraprofessional, not even a cafeteria worker or a janitor that can tell you no, they're not going to do something that's in the best interest of their children.
Right. Because the climate has been set for, here's what we do. Like you said, it's from top down, and here's what we're about for the best interest of our clients, the students. Well, we could go on and on, as you know, we could, Ms. Taylor. Time is running down. I appreciate you at the last minute, 30 minutes before showtime, and you came through in a clutch, so I do appreciate you. Any closing comments? You got like 30 seconds.
Oh gosh, I would just say to parents, you are the driver. I tell parents every day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I close out all of my little segments that I do for Dreams KC by saying, as a parent, you are your child's first teacher, therefore you are their best teacher. I think that every parent has learned something about their children during this time, and I think that it's now time for them to be their child's cheerleader and advocate. You do not allow anyone to tell you what is best for your children. You know them better than anyone else. And so you take the bull by the horns and you demand innovative educational experiences for your children. And that very well may be unschooling them at this point in time.
Well, all right, Miss Katina Taylor, Dreams Consulting KC. Is it .com, .org? What is your?
It is no website. No, you can find Dreams KC and Dreams Consulting on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn at any time. We have been pushing out a lot of video content since COVID has hit, and you can find that mainly on Facebook. We link to it in our other platforms, but if you go to Facebook, go to Dreams KC, you can find us. Definitely.
I'm still waiting on my phone call. I did respond to the survey.
You did, yes, yes.
I'm still waiting for my placement
Follow up
on your video too.
You know what? Now that we've done this together, I definitely need to bring you on, because we do need to talk more about digital inequities, the work that you do, and what you have coming up to support children and families as they go into these summer months and then in the fall as well. So we'll do a swap. Now that I've been on your show, then I want to definitely bring you on and let's talk to families about technology and how you utilize that to support learning.
Okay, sounds good. And then if you, I might call you when I hang up on the show. We'll talk for a bit offline. Well, that has been our show for today. Again, I'm Ina Montgomery of Urban Tech. I am a Digi-Sis in a Digi world, bringing you the news regarding K through 12 technology, specific for Black students in the urban core. I cover suburban as well, Black kids wherever they are. We need to be advocates for them. And as I've been saying from the very beginning of the show, we have the onus to make sure that our kids are being educated and to speak on their behalf when it comes to educational issues and other. So I look forward to seeing you guys again next Thursday at 5 o'clock. Have a good day.